Most men accept decline after 60 as inevitable, a catastrophic error. You're not merely aging, you're surrendering to destructive habits that are shortening your life unnecessarily. Each day you persist with these behaviors, you're actively choosing premature death over vitality. The human organism isn't designed to collapse, it's designed to adapt. These 15 habits, they're not just bad choices, they're existential threats. And the medical establishment won't tell you this enough. Your remaining years, their quality and quantity, depend entirely on what you do starting today. The responsibility is yours alone. Number 1. The sedentary surrender. I've watched countless men crumble into their armchairs after retirement like insects trapped in amber. There's something almost mythological about it, Prometheus bound not to a rock, but to a recliner, remote in hand, watching life pass by through the flickering glow of a television screen. What's happening psychologically is profound. Your body is designed for movement. It's written into your DNA, into the very architecture of your musculoskeletal system. When you surrender to stillness, you're not just weakening muscle, you're signaling to the deepest parts of your psyche that your story is ending. And by God, your body listens. This isn't merely about exercise as some doctors coldly prescribe it. It's about the fundamental difference between being an actor in your own life versus becoming a spectator. I worked with a former executive, 72 years old, who had allowed himself to calcify in his habits. His solution wasn't complicated. It was a daily walk at first, just 20 minutes, then 30. He built it into a ritual, not a chore. He witnessed the seasons change, nodded to neighbors, reclaimed his place in the physical world. The question isn't whether you can still move. It's whether you're willing to face the discomfort of beginning again. Your remaining decades will be shaped by this choice: surrender to sedentary living, or maintain your rightful place in the physical hierarchy of existence. Number 2. Nutritional nihilism. When a man reaches his 7th decade, he often develops what I call nutritional nihilism, the belief that dietary discipline no longer matters. I've lived this long, the thinking goes, so what's the harm in indulgence? This represents a profound misunderstanding of how the body maintains itself. In Jungian terms, this is shadow behavior, the unconscious saboteur emerging precisely when discipline matters most. Your body's regenerative capabilities are diminishing, which means your margins for error are narrower, not wider. I encountered a professor, brilliant in his field, who'd abandoned all pretense of nutritional care. His awakening came not through lectures, but through his grandchildren. The realization that to witness their growth required his presence, his clarity of mind, his vitality. He began simply, eliminated processed foods, embraced protein at each meal, reintroduced vegetables he'd abandoned decades ago. The transformation wasn't merely physical, his cognitive function improved, his energy stabilized. The nihilism gave way to purpose. This isn't about asceticism, it's about recognizing that your body is still the vehicle through which you experience everything meaningful in existence. Number 3. Sleep dismissal. There's a peculiar badge of honor among men of accomplishment, the dismissal of sleep as some biological weakness to be conquered. I see it constantly in men past 60, this belief that sleep is negotiable, that 4 or 5 hours will suffice, that rest is somehow a character flaw rather than a biological imperative. This maps precisely onto what we know about masculine archetypes: the warrior who never rests, the provider who sacrifices himself. But here's the brutal reality: your brain is actively removing toxins during deep sleep cycles. Without this cleansing, cognitive decline accelerates dramatically. The very organ that houses your consciousness, your memories, your capacity for meaning, it's being compromised. A retired engineer I counseled had developed this pattern over decades: prideful sleep deprivation. His transformation began with a sleep ritual. No screens after 9, a darkened room, a consistent schedule. Within weeks, his wife reported he seemed present again, engaged. The fog of constant fatigue lifted. Sleep isn't a luxury or an indulgence. It's the foundation upon which your remaining cognitive function stands. The choice is stark. Protect your sleep or accelerate your mental decline. There is no third option. Number 4. Cognitive complacency. I recall a brilliant surgeon I worked with, 40 years of saving lives, hands steady as stone. When he retired at 68, he decided his mind had earned a rest. Within 18 months, his wife could barely get him to engage in conversation beyond weather and television schedules. This represents a profound misunderstanding of how your brain maintains function. The neural architecture of your mind follows one immutable rule: use it or lose it. This isn't simply psychological theory, it's written into the biological substrate of your existence. Your neural pathways require regular activation and challenge to maintain their integrity. The surgeon's redemption came when his daughter bought him a chess set and insisted on weekly games. Initial resistance gave way to rekindled competitive spirit. He began studying openings, then joined a local club, eventually teaching the game to his grandchildren. His mental acuity didn't just stabilize, it improved significantly. Cognitive complacency isn't merely unfortunate, it's an active betrayal of your potential. Your brain is designed to solve problems until your final breath. When you surrender that responsibility, you're not embracing retirement, you're accelerating cognitive entropy. The mind that stops grappling with complexity quickly becomes incapable of it. Number 5. Stress suppression. The stoic silence of men in their later years is celebrated as wisdom or restraint, but I've seen behind those masks in therapy sessions what appears as stoicism is often emotional suppression on an industrial scale. And make no mistake, this isn't strength. It's a catastrophic psychological burden. Biologically, chronic stress hormones like cortisol literally shrink the hippocampus, your memory center. The data is unequivocal. Suppressed emotional stress accelerates cognitive decline. The very act of manning up and swallowing your emotional reality is damaging your brain. A retired military officer came to me after his wife threatened divorce. 50 years of emotional suppression had rendered him nearly mute on matters of feeling. His breakthrough began not with grand gestures, but with simply identifying emotions in his body, tension in his shoulders as anxiety, heaviness in his chest as sadness. He began journaling, naming these states, eventually sharing them with his wife. This wasn't about becoming emotionally demonstrative, it was about honoring reality. When you suppress emotional stress, you're not handling it, you're converting it into physiological damage. Your remaining years will be defined either by emotional authenticity or by the accelerating cognitive cost of denial. Number 6. Resignation to memory loss. There's a moment I've witnessed repeatedly. A man forgets a name or misplaces his keys, chuckles and says, "Senior moment." This seemingly innocent self-deprecation masks a dangerous capitulation. When you attribute memory lapses to inevitable decline, you're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of cognitive deterioration. This resignation stems from a deeper psychological pattern, what psychologists call learned helplessness, the belief that your actions have no impact on outcomes. Once you accept memory decline as unavoidable, you stop engaging in the very activities that would maintain function. I worked with a professor emeritus who began experiencing word-finding difficulties. Instead of resignation, he approached it as a technical problem. He developed a rigorous memory training protocol, daily vocabulary exercises, memorization practice, even learning new pieces on the piano he'd played in his youth. Within months, the improvements were remarkable. The neuroplasticity of your brain, its ability to form new connections and pathways, doesn't disappear with age. It requires deliberate challenge. Memory is not a fixed resource that inevitably depletes. It's a skill that atrophies without practice. Your cognitive capacity isn't set on a predetermined downward trajectory. That's not optimism, it's neuroscience. The choice between resignation and resistance will largely determine whether your mind remains a reliable ally or becomes an unreliable adversary in your remaining years. Number 7. Relationship neglect. I'm reminded of a distinguished judge who, after 40 years on the bench, found himself increasingly alone. His wife had maintained their social calendar for decades. When she passed, he discovered he'd outsourced not just social planning, but the very skills of human connection. This pattern reveals something fundamental about masculine identity in Western culture. Men often build their relational skills around functional contexts, work, sports, shared projects. When those structures disappear, the underlying competencies for maintaining relationships are revealed to be underdeveloped or absent entirely. The judge's transformation began with a simple commitment: one phone call daily to someone in his life. Initial conversations were awkward, perfunctory, but persistence revealed a truth. Relationships aren't maintained through grand gestures, but through consistent presence. 6 months later, he'd rebuilt connections with former colleagues, rekindled friendships with law school classmates, and deepened bonds with his adult children. Relationship neglect isn't merely unfortunate, it's biologically destructive. Social isolation increases inflammatory markers and stress hormones. Studies show that social disconnection is as damaging to longevity as smoking 15 cigarettes daily. This isn't speculative, it's measurable physiology. Your task isn't to become someone you're not, it's to recognize that relationship maintenance is not optional for survival. It's as essential as any medication you've been prescribed, and considerably more effective. Number 8. Purpose abandonment. There's a pernicious myth that purpose belongs to youth and middle age, that after 65 a man's purpose naturally diminishes to leisure, reminiscence, and passivity. I've observed countless men surrender their sense of purpose precisely when they need it most. From a Jungian perspective, this represents a catastrophic failure of the archetypal transition from warrior-provider to elder sage. Without conscious development of this later archetype, men often fall into a purposeless void. I worked with a retired engineer who spent 2 years in front of his television before his doctor referred him to me. His revitalization began when he volunteered to mentor young engineers at a local community college. Initially, he questioned what value he could provide in a rapidly changing field. The answer emerged quickly: contextual wisdom, pattern recognition, perspective that only decades of experience can provide. What's essential to understand is that purpose after 60 isn't simply about staying busy, it's about contribution that leverages your accumulated wisdom. The absence of external structure doesn't signal the end of purpose. It creates space for purpose that arises from within, from the distilled essence of your life experience. The brutal reality is this: men without purpose after 60 deteriorate at measurably faster rates, both cognitively and physically. Your remaining years will be defined either by continued contribution or by accelerating irrelevance. There is no neutral position. Number 9. Community disconnection. The modern Western male faces a particular tragedy in later years. Having built his life around work and nuclear family, he often discovers he belongs nowhere in particular. Community disconnection isn't merely lonely. It removes the social scaffolding that supports health, identity, and meaning. This disconnection stems from a deeper cultural pattern: the atomization of modern life, the belief that independence is the highest virtue. What this misunderstands is that humans evolved as tribal creatures. Your brain is literally designed to function within a community context. A retired accountant I counseled had withdrawn completely from communal life. His reintegration began not with grand commitments but with regular presence at a local coffee shop. Simply being recognized by name by the barista provided a small but significant sense of place. This expanded to a weekly men's breakfast group, then to involvement in local civic issues. The physiological benefits were profound. His blood pressure normalized, sleep improved, his posture literally straightened as his sense of social relevance returned. Community isn't an optional enhancement to life after 60. It's a biological necessity. The research is unambiguous. Men with strong community connections live longer, maintain cognitive function better, and report significantly higher life satisfaction. Your task isn't to maintain independence at all costs. It's to find interdependence that honors your autonomy while acknowledging your fundamental human need for belonging. Your remaining years will be defined either by meaningful community connection or by the accelerating physical and cognitive costs of isolation. The choice is unavoidable. Number 10. Symptom denial. I remember clearly a university colleague, brilliant physicist, contributed to our understanding of quantum mechanics, who ignored persistent chest pain for months. Just indigestion, he insisted. By the time he reluctantly visited the emergency room, the heart attack had caused irreversible damage. This represents a profound psychological mechanism: denial as a form of control. By refusing to acknowledge symptoms, you maintain the illusion that they don't exist or don't matter. This isn't rational. It's a primitive defense mechanism against the existential threat of vulnerability. What's particularly tragic is how this denial maps perfectly onto traditional masculine socialization. From boyhood, many men are taught that acknowledging physical distress is weakness. This framework might serve a young soldier or athlete, but after 60 it becomes actively lethal. The physicist's recovery included not just cardiac rehabilitation but a fundamental reckoning with this pattern. He developed a system, a journal, where he documented physical changes without judgment. This created psychological distance between observation and identity. He could note symptoms without feeling diminished by them. The stark reality is this: your body after 60 is sending vital communications about potential problems while they remain addressable. Denial doesn't demonstrate strength. It represents a fundamental abdication of responsibility to yourself and to those who depend on you. Every symptom you ignore potentially shortens your functional lifespan. Number 11, medication mismanagement. The medication habits of men over 60 often follow one of two destructive patterns, either outright refusal to take prescribed medications or haphazard adherence that renders them ineffective or dangerous. Both stem from the same psychological root, resistance to accepting a new reality. I worked extensively with a former business executive who prided himself on never taking pills his entire life. When diagnosed with hypertension, he saw medication as personal failure rather than medical intervention. This framework medication as weakness nearly cost him his life when a stroke hospitalized him 3 months later. His transformation began with a fundamental reframing. Rather than viewing medication as a crutch, he came to understand it as a tool, no different from the reading glasses he readily accepted or the hearing aid he willingly used. The moral dimension dissolved when he recognized that his vascular system deserved the same pragmatic support as his sensory organs. The practical system matters enormously. The executive created a ritual around his medications: morning pills taken with breakfast, evening doses with dinner, weekly organization of his pill case as part of Sunday routine. The physicality of the system reinforced the habit until it became automatic. What's at stake here transcends the specific condition being treated. Medication adherence after 60 is a direct reflection of your relationship with reality itself. Are you willing to acknowledge the actual condition of your body and respond appropriately, or will you sacrifice years of function for the illusion of invulnerability? Number 12, preventative care avoidance. There exists a particular irony among accomplished men having spent decades meticulously maintaining their vehicles, homes, and financial portfolios. They often neglect the most basic preventative maintenance of their bodies, skipped physicals, avoided screenings, ignored checkups. This pattern reflects not forgetfulness but active avoidance. This avoidance stems from a profound psychological mechanism, the fear of discovering problems you'd rather not know about. It's the same impulse that makes people avoid opening bills or checking declining investments. But while financial avoidance has economic consequences, medical avoidance has existential ones. A corporate attorney I counseled had avoided doctors for nearly a decade. His awakening came not through personal revelation, but through his daughter's pregnancy. The prospect of a grandchild forced a confrontation with time. Would he be present and functional in this child's life, or would preventable conditions rob him of those years? His approach became methodical. He created a comprehensive health calendar, scheduling regular checkups, screenings, and vaccinations as dutifully as he had once maintained his court appearances. The initial physical revealed several manageable conditions that, left undetected, would have progressively diminished his capacity. What's essential to understand is that preventative care isn't about extending life at all costs. It's about maintaining functional capacity for as long as possible. The years you have remaining aren't guaranteed to be vital ones. The difference between active, engaged longevity and years of disability often comes down to early detection and intervention. The choice is stark. Either you commit to regular preventative care, or you accept accelerated decline and potentially preventable suffering. There is no middle ground where neglect produces positive outcomes. Your remaining years will be defined by this decision, whether you approach your health with the same diligence you applied to your career and finances, or whether you surrender potential years of function to the psychological comfort of avoidance. The responsibility for this choice rests entirely with you. Number 13, identity dissolution. I've observed a particularly tragic pattern among retired professionals, men who spent decades building careers suddenly unable to answer the simplest question: who are you now? Without their professional identity, they become ghosts in their own lives. This represents a profound psychological error, the conflation of function with identity. When your sense of self is entirely wrapped in what you do professionally, retirement doesn't just end a job, it threatens to erase you entirely. A surgeon I worked with had defined himself exclusively through his medical practice for 4 decades. When he retired, he described feeling erased from existence. His recovery began with a deliberate inventory of non-professional identities he had neglected: father, grandfather, reader, amateur historian, community member. The key insight was recognizing that his professional identity hadn't been created in a single day. It had developed over years through deliberate action. His post-retirement identity required the same intentional development. This isn't merely about finding hobbies. It's about the fundamental psychological work of identity integration. Your task after 60 isn't to replace your professional identity with leisure activities. It's to develop a more comprehensive sense of self that incorporates your professional past while transcending its limitations. The alternative, identity dissolution, creates a vacuum that quickly fills with purposelessness and despair. Men who cannot answer "Who am I now?" experience measurably faster cognitive decline, higher rates of depression, and earlier mortality. Your very survival depends on your capacity to reconstruct identity beyond professional function. Number 14, passion extinction. There's a particular deadness in the eyes of men who have allowed their passions to extinguish, a flatness that reflects not physical decline but spiritual surrender. After decades of subordinating personal interests to professional and family responsibilities, many men discover they've lost touch with what genuinely animates them. From an existential perspective, this represents a profound failure of authenticity. Without the driving force of genuine interest and enthusiasm, life becomes mere duration, time passing without meaning or engagement. I counseled a retired executive who could no longer identify anything that truly excited him. His revival began with systematic experimentation, a commitment to try one new activity weekly for a year. Most held no particular appeal, but woodworking awakened something dormant. The tactile engagement, the progressive mastery, the tangible results. These elements reconnected him with a capacity for absorption and flow he had forgotten existed. What's essential to understand is that passion isn't frivolous, it's biologically significant. Engagement in activities that generate genuine interest creates neurochemical responses that enhance cognitive function, immune response, and cardiovascular health. Your enthusiasms aren't merely psychological indulgences, they're powerful biological interventions. The evidence is unequivocal. Men who maintain genuine passions after 60 live longer, maintain cognitive function better, and report significantly higher life satisfaction than those who surrender to passive existence. Your remaining years will either be animated by genuine enthusiasm or diminished by its absence. There is no neutral position. Number 15, future abdication. Perhaps the most destructive psychological habit after 60 is the surrender of your future, the belief that your meaningful life is behind you, that what remains is merely epilogue. This temporal orientation doesn't just diminish motivation, it fundamentally corrupts your relationship with time itself. This pattern stems from a profound misunderstanding of human development. The psychological work of later life isn't about managing decline, it's about integration, wisdom formation, and the unique creative contributions that only temporal perspective can provide. A professor emeritus I counseled had fallen into this pattern, speaking of himself almost exclusively in past tense. His transformation began with a deliberate project, writing a book he had deferred for decades. The substance mattered less than the fundamental orientation. He was creating something that extended into the future, that would exist beyond him. What emerged wasn't merely productivity, but a reclaimed relationship with time. He began making 5-year plans, mentoring younger colleagues, planting trees that would mature long after his death. Each action reinforced a fundamental truth. His life remained an active creation, not passive completion. The research confirms this principle. Men who maintain active future orientation after 60 demonstrate better cognitive preservation, lower rates of depression, and longer functional lifespans than those who surrender their future. This isn't coincidental. Your psychological orientation toward time directly impacts your neurological and physiological functioning. Your remaining years will be defined either by continued becoming or by premature psychological death. The choice between viewing yourself as an active participant in an unfolding future or as a passive witness to your own decline will largely determine not just the quality but the actual duration of your life. The responsibility for this choice rests entirely with you. No one, not your doctor, not your family, not society, can make this decision on your behalf. The fundamental question is stark. Will you claim ownership of your future, or will you surrender it to the comfortable illusion that your meaningful life has already concluded? Every habit I've outlined isn't merely shortening your life, it's corrupting its fundamental meaning. The years after 60 aren't a footnote to your existence. They represent potentially the most significant chapter in your story, if you have the courage to claim them. The chaos that awaits the man who surrenders to these habits isn't just physical decline, it's existential irrelevance. Your body will deteriorate regardless of your choices. That's biology. But the rate and dignity of that process, the meaning extracted from each remaining day, that's psychology, that's choice, that's responsibility. Order emerges when you refuse sedentary surrender, when you maintain nutritional discipline, when you protect your sleep, when you challenge your mind, when you process your emotions authentically, when you maintain relationships, when you contribute purposefully, when you belong to community, when you address symptoms honestly, when you manage medications diligently, when you pursue preventative care systematically, when you rebuild identity consciously, when you pursue genuine passions, and when you actively claim your future. The alternative isn't comfort, it's suffering accelerated by your own hand. Ask yourself, will you be the author of your remaining years, or merely their passive witness? The difference isn't academic, it's measured in time, in function, in meaning. The responsibility is yours alone, and so is the opportunity. Choose wisely. Your life, not merely its duration but its very essence, depends on it.